Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, little Sambo. Sambo. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, cockatoo.
Angel Sides, welcome to Greed for the Death and Demise of All Americans. This is a commentary and attempt to get free speech television that relies on donations from people like you and me on our cable networks, which is currently dominated by our mainstream media, which relies on sponsors such as multinational corporations. Corporations to know the truth and have uncensored media. You can call this number 424-6075 and request free speech television be on our cable networks. And also, you can get free speech television if you have satellite TV, and that is DishNet channel 9415 and DirecTV channel 348. It also is on the internet. But even if you have one of these media outlets, call Comcast and let them know you want free speech television on our cable network so our whole community is informed. It takes everyone to make change. And this is a clip from the documentary called Full Signal.
There are standards for non-ionizing radiation protection. They are set on the basis of the assumption that there's no adverse health effect to humans unless the radiation is sufficient to cause tissue heating. In other words, it's acting like a microwave oven, and you don't want to bake your brain as you would a potato in your microwave oven. The assumptions behind the standards that exist are simply wrong. They're not set by health professionals, they're set by physicists and engineer types, and they are ignoring the evidence for human health.
When you're a surgeon, and I'm dealing with people, of course, every day, but in part of my research, I've been studying rats when it comes to what happens to the rats when they are exerted to the radiation from mobile phones, basically. But also then you can translate the information that you collect from rats being exposed to the mobile phones into a knowledge about what happens at the longer distance. And we have shown that animals who have been exposed for 2 hours to the radio frequency of a mobile phone, both at 28 days afterwards and 50 days afterwards, there are damaged nerve cells in up to 2% of the tissue, both in the region where we keep our memory function and also in the layer of the brain with which we think. This makes me feel that this is something we have to be careful about.
You can clearly see that from a number of studies that has used low levels, mimicking what you get right now while we do this interview from the cellular towers. And you see there are a lot of dramatic effects on biological systems. We talk about 24/7, around-the-clock exposure, wherever you are, and your whole body. You never get away from it. And it seems from our studies that maybe your immune system can cope with for a time, but it will deteriorate, and then the irradiation will definitely damage cells at a deeper level. And the question is, what will then happen? And for us, the big question marks are effects, for instance, on the immune system, on the DNA, on the short-term memory, concentration capacity, sleep quality, fertility, etc.
People have complained of dizziness, inability to concentrate, disruption of menstrual cycles. Two women that I know who are struggling very, very much in terms of getting pregnant, and the first one definitely noticed a change after the towers had been up for a while.
And the question is, of course, as you say, we don't see people falling dead on the street, but for instance, here in Sweden, more than 1/3 of people report heavy problems with their nighttime sleep. And sleep is one of these subjective areas which definitely various forms of electromagnetic fields will have an impact on.
The particular concern is the unique vulnerability of children. And the more research that comes out from various studies, particularly the Scandinavian studies, show that children that begin to use cell phones before the age of 20 are about 5 times more likely to go on to develop brain cancer than if they use them after the age of 30. And people that begin to use cell phones between the ages of 20 and 30 are more vulnerable to develop brain cancer than those that use them after 30.
I think it's a very dangerous thing that we're doing now in so many young people in particular, using cell phones as their primary form of communication and abandoning their landline connections. The communications industries, they want the world to go wireless because it's much cheaper for them to do that. That's really where they're trying to force the technology to go.
If you start at a very young age and you speak every day, several hours, it might be so that already in the middle age you have extorted your reserve capacities of your brain, so that autoimmune diseases and neurodegenerative diseases might debut earlier than they should.
And now, for the first time in human history, brain tumors are the #1 cancer killer of children under the age of 18. For the first time in human history.
But the industry has its own response to concerns about cell towers going up. Just hide them.
This steeple that has inside it a number of cell sites is a replica of the steeple we had built 53 years ago on the church, which is very beneficial for our town because they don't like to see unattractive cell sites around, and no one even knows it's here.
If they've defined it, they've framed it, and they've interpreted it and set the standards accordingly, how likely are they to say, oh, well, we need a redo on this one?
This is a very serious issue of which we don't have the answers, and we're not doing anything about it, not even studying it. In the United States today, there is not one study going on. 0.
It's impossible to get any funding, which is odd, and I don't have any clear-cut answer. You have to ask politicians, funding organizations, the industry, and so on, why they don't want scientists like myself to really prove it's safe.
We have the outrageous situation where our U.S. Congress passed a law several years ago that prohibits communities from objecting to the placement of a cell phone tower on the basis of concerns for health.
It was 1996 when the Congress of the United States, responding to industry requests, set up a plan to have a nationwide cell transmission system. The Congress assigned to the Federal Communications Commission the responsibility for licensing telecom companies and for trying to keep obstacles out of the way. And so Congress passed a provision that preempts all state and local government and said that if the FCC set up safety regulations, that would govern and nobody else could interfere with it.
Telecom companies essentially bought and paid Congress for the votes to pass this act, which they believed had absolute preemption over local zoning and planning regulations, taking local control of the placement of towers out of the hands of the people who are going to live right next to them.
Dina Yeager, a mother of 2 children, heard news of a plan by Verizon to install a 150-foot cell tower on a firehouse less than 1,200 feet away from her home. Concerned over her family's health and safety, but knowing she could not raise the issue in court, Dina Yeager instead challenged the placement of the antenna based on the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the fact that rare and endangered species of birds frequent her property.
It's ironic, isn't it, that we have to raise the issue of the safety of birds, but I've often said birds don't have lobbyists, and it may have left the very loophole it requires to get us to a high court to hear this issue.
In the Arab village of Asifia in northern Israel, frustrations grew over the large number of antennas in the village and the lack of government response to their requests to take them down. But the situation changed on March 14, 2000, when telecom engineers arrived in the village.
في هاي المنطقة في عندنا بعض الشباب اللي راقبوا التقنيين ووصلوا لهون لاقوا انه عم بينزلوا الاجهزة مشان يحطوا الاجهزة ويقووا المحطة اللي كانت متواجدة هون في هاي البيت هناك. هون احتشدوا آلاف من المواطنين، يعني صار في تغمر عند المواطنين من هذا الوضع، لذلك قالوا اذا القانون ما بدي يوقف على جنبنا احنا رايحين نزيل الانتنات.
We took the places of the antennas and put them on a map. And we took all the cases of cancer in last 7 years and put them also on a map. And we got a thrilling picture of cases of cancer near the antennas. And when you see that cancer cases are just near the antennas, you can see the association. In Usfied, where they put antennas, after about 6-7 years, they started to get cancer cases near the antennas. Many cases just where the antennas were.
3.5 years ago, I had cancer. It was very difficult for me when I know it, because when I was in the office of the doctor that said to me that you had cancer, my daughter, the eldest one, was with me. It was very difficult for me as a mother to look to my daughter's eyes and see her crying for me. There was another difficult moment for me after I knew that I had this disease. The moment that I had to tell my mother and my father that they have another child who was affected by cancer. And it was scaring till death. How can I look in my mother's eyes and tell her that your daughter had cancer? My mother was crying all the time. 4 surgeries and 3.5 months of chemistry. And after that, the radiation, the whole treatment. My youngest child was 3 years old only. It was difficult for me because everything was going on my mind, that I'm going to die and leave him alone to struggle without a mother.
بعد 1995 صارت تكاثر في أمراض السرطان في عسيفيا، وصارت الأمراض تزيد والحالات الموت تزيد، وصارت المواطنين حتى وصلوا لوضع إنه صاروا يخافوا يعملوا فحوصات دم أو يروحوا لعند الطبيب إنه يلاقي عندهم في مرض سرطان. حالات الموت الغريبة من نوعها والكثير اللي كانت في شهر نوفمبر 1999. كان في هنا حالات موت نتيجة أمراض السرطان في شهر 1 15 واحد توفوا سرطان، منهن حياة أخوي.
Nowadays, Suleiman is on a new mission to locate hidden antennas in the village.
الأجهزة اللي موجودة معنا احنا بنلقط إنه في إشعاع موجود في المنطقة، ابتداء من هاي المنطقة من هون ناحية البيت هذاك اللي موجود قبالنا خزان المي، بعدين هناك تحت هذا الخزان تحت هاي البيوت الإشعاع بيوقف، وبعدين لما بنطلع منه للغرب بيرجع الإشعاع وبيبين على الأجهزة الموجودة معنا. احنا كل ما عم نقرب على البيت الإشعاع بيعلى أكثر، عم بيقوى، وهذا بدل انه البيت فيه اشعاع، يعني في مصدر للاشعاع اللي عم بيطلعه سببه الانتينا.
The Druze, Christian and Muslim leaders of the village put forth a joint statement proclaiming it's sacrilegious to install cell phone antennas.
هذا الشيء كان له تأثير فعال، تأثيره كان جدا فعال عند ناس اللي كمان زاحوا انتينات اللي احنا ما كناش معلمين انه في عندنا انتينات. قبل شهرين ثلاثة قدرنا ننزل قبل تشغيلها محطة اللي كانت بحطوها بين اسفيا والداني، ووصلنا الخبر ورحنا لصاحب البيت. اما لما فتنا على الدار لجوا وشفنا وين كانوا بدهم يحطوا الاجهزة قبال غرف النوم تبع اطفاله، هو يمكن ما فكر انه اطفاله يمرضوا، بس انا متاكد انه طمع في ال 1500 ولا 2000 دولار اللي كانوا بده يدفعوهم. والشركات عم تستغل الوضع المادي المزري اللي احنا موجودين فيه مشان يقدموا مصالحهم الخاصه. واليوم عايش البلد اليوم من غير انتينات، والحمد لله عايشين. الانتينات هي مش شيء اللي انا مجبور اخذه، هو مش حليب للاطفال. وفي كثير ناس اللي بيقول لك انا هيك مرتاح، انا هيك مرتاح ما بدي انتينا.
One of the many ironies in all this business, if people agree not to use their phone, they wouldn't need a tower. So, you know, it would be quite easy to have a region without a tower by just making an agreement. Listen, if you come and live here, you're not going to be able to use your cell phone. You're going to have to use an old-fashioned landline. You know, end of story. I mean, it's not an impossible thing. It's just a choice. People love the phones, hate the towers. They don't want to live without the cell phones, but they don't want their tower. Well, if they don't use their phone, they don't need the tower. It's really that simple.
Too much. He don't talk enough like a cockatoo should. Oh, squawk, squawk too much. Pick on his face, I picked his face. Oh, stand around all over the place. He will squawk you.
We're not going to be able to keep you for the rest of the trip, so thank you so much. Will you remain with us for the rest of the trip? To the other guys back to back, I felt like I was losing you a little.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, cockatoo. Happy birthday, the little Sambo. Happy birthday to you.
But for Scott and Joshua, it's the end of the road. I feel.
This is the research that is not funded. There's very little research being done on the dangers of cell phone towers. But in other countries, there's plenty of independent research being done, and this is the research that is not funded by the telecommunications industry, as illustrated by Vija, published May 31st, 2011. Research on cell tower radiation. Australia, as far back as 1995, Professor Henry Lau and N.P. Singh documented damage to the DNA of rats when exposed to the same kind of radiation as that emitted by cell towers. He conducted another study in 2004 which confirmed these earlier results. DNA damage can lead to a wide variety of disorders, including cancer. In another Australian study, 2 years later, Dr. Bruce Hawking in Sydney found that children living near TV and FM broadcast towers emitting the same kind of radiation as cell towers had more than twice the rate of leukemia than children living more than 7 miles away. New Zealand. In 2002, Dr. Neil Cherry, biophysicist at the University of New Zealand, wrote a 120-page review of 188 scientific studies on the dangers of cell towers. He stated that the government standards were based on thermal effects and did not take into consideration the non-thermal effects that also take place, such as cell death and DNA breakdown. To claim there is no adverse effect from phone towers flies in the face of a large body of evidence. Germany, Horst Egger, in a study conducted in 2004 in Naila, Germany, gathered evidence from 1,000 patients residing at the same address during a period of 10 years. Their findings were that the proportion of a newly developed cancer case was 3 times higher among those who had lived at a distance of up to 400 meters from a cell tower compared to those living further away. They also fell ill on the average of 8 years earlier. In the UK, in 2007, Dr. John Walker compiled a series of cluster studies on the effects of cell tower radiation. 7 clusters of cancer and other serious illnesses were discovered around mobile phone masts. Studies of the site showed high incidences of cancer, brain hemorrhages, and high blood pressure within a radius of 400 yards of the mobile phone masts. One of the studies showed a cluster of 31 cancers around a single street. A quarter of the 30 staff at a special school within sight of the 90-foot mast had developed tumors since 2000, while another quarter had suffered significant health problems. Israel. In 2010, Dr. Sigal Sadesky of Tel Aviv University testified at the U.S. Senate hearing that she had examined 622 people living from 3 to 7 years within 350 meters of a cell tower. They were compared to a group who lived further away. The results were startling. There were over 4 times as many cancer patients from the area near the cell tower. Women were especially susceptible. India. In 2011, Dr. Nihad Kumar at India's Anna University indicated a rise in attention disorders in people, especially in children who receive prolonged exposure to EMFs from cell towers. What will it take to alert people to the dangers of cell towers? With so much evidence about cell tower radiation health risks, how is it that governments allow cell phone companies to continue to erect more and more cell towers and antennas? One factor, of course, is that although ever-growing numbers of people are voicing concerns about possible health risks with cell towers, most people want good reception on their phones wherever they happen to be. And competing cell phone companies are very accommodating. They strive to put up as many cell towers and antennas as they can to keep their far-roaming customers satisfied. But another reason is that governments continue to protect the rights of the telecom industry to put up as many towers as they want. In the U.S., the wireless industry is protected by Article 704 of the Telecommunications Act, signed by President Clinton in 1996. This act does not allow rejection of tower based on health risks. It even prohibits arguments of potential health risks from towers to be made at a public hearing. It's well known that the U.S. government receives sizable revenues every year in taxes from the telecommunications industry, and the telecom industry, of course, benefits greatly from its sales. They are now skyrocketing, even in a depressed economy. A speaker at a recent hearing on the subject of the dangers of cell towers aptly quoted Upton Sinclair. "It is difficult to get a man to understand something, while his salary depends on him not understanding it." Dr. Martin Blank of Columbia University at the annual conference of the Institute of Biology and Ecology said that while there is not yet epidemiological data linking cell phone radiation to breast cancer, there is evidence from cell studies showing inhibition of the effects of tamoxifen and electromagnetic fields, as well as evidence of tumors where women have placed cell phones in their bras, news that was featured recently on KTVU in the San Francisco Bay Area. Can this ruling potentially lead future litigation in the U.S. and elsewhere? Can it somehow alter the insurance landscape Yes, it can. The cell phone industry, however, is one of the fastest growing and strongest global industries in the world today, and may be even stronger than the pharmaceutical industry. As a multi-trillion-dollar industry whose advertising dollars support the heavily influenced media around the world, the industry is capable of wielding great power and making sizable political donations. There's going to be a window when people are extremely vulnerable. That window is right now. Around the world, many countries are already adopting the precautionary principle. Russian officials have issued the recommendation that all children under the age of 18 should avoid using cell phones entirely. The UK, Israel, Belgium, Germany, India, France, and Finland also urge citizens to err on the side of caution with respect to their children's use of cell phones.
This is an article, Accelerating Intelligence, May 24, 2011. New studies reveal evidence that cell phone radiation damages DNA, brain, and sperm. New independent studies offer proof that confirms findings from the Council of Europe. Pulsed digital signals from cell phones disrupt DNA, impair brain function, and lower sperm count, according to a statement by the Environmental Health Trust. On May 23rd, a think tank of experts organized by Gazi University and EHT convened at a workshop in Istanbul, Turkey, Science Update Cell Phones and Health, to present the findings. Professor Nesrin Sayyan of the World Health Organization, a NATO advisor and head and founder of the Biophysics Department and Bioelectromagnetics Laboratory at Gazi University in Ankara, and founder of the Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection Center, found that just 4 hours of exposure to RF EMF disrupts the ability of human brain cells to repair damaged genes. Other new work from Australia shows damage to human sperm. This work provides a warning signal to all of us. The evidence justifies precautionary measures to reduce the risk for every one of us, says Professor Wilhelm Moskoller from the Medical University of Vienna, who has led European research teams that found the RF EMF induces DNA breaks. 2 years after false accusations against scientists who describe DNA breaks, recent results finally show that exposure-induced DNA breaks are real, according to these scientists. Impact on reproductive health and cell death. Insect studies have demonstrated that acute exposures to GSM signals brings about DNA fragmentation in insects' ovarian cells and consequently a large reduction in the reproductive capacity of the insects. Further studies demonstrate that long exposures induce cell death to the insects in the study. Dr. Adamantia Fragopoulou, leader of a team at the University of Athens, found effects on embryonic development taking place in the presence of a mild electromagnetic field. Throughout the gestation period, exposures to radiation for just 6 minutes a day affects the bone formation of fetuses. The team suggests that this is probably caused by the interaction of cell phone radiation with crucial molecules and ions involved in embryogenesis. Dr. Sayan found that the increasing use of cell phones and the increasing number of associated base stations are becoming a widespread source of non-ionizing magnetic radiation. This work suggests that some biological effects are likely to occur even with low-level electromagnetic fields. The team concluded that 900 and 1,800 megahertz of radiation levels is related to an increase in the permeability of the blood-brain barrier in young adult male rats. The rats' brains can be used to correspond to the brains of human teenagers. Children are increasingly heavy users of cell phones at higher frequencies. Children absorb more energy from external radio frequency radiation than adults because their tissues normally contain a large number of ions and so has a higher conductivity. They conclude limiting cell phones and cordless phone use by young children and teenagers to the lowest possible level and urgently banning telecom companies from marketing to them. In addition, research from a team at the University of Athens found that rats exposed to cell phone radiation were unable to remember the location of places previously familiar to them. This finding is of potentially critical importance for people who heavily rely on spatial memory for recording information about their environment and spatial orientation.
if you would like free speech television on our cable networks, if you could call this number, 424-6075. And if you have satellite TV, you already get free speech television. Channels 9415 and channel 9415 DishNet, channel 348 DirecTV. Now, even if you get those media outlets, it's very important that you call Comcast and let them know you want free speech television on our cable networks, because it takes the whole community to be informed to make change.
There's a saying, evil prevails when good men do nothing. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to call this number. Call Schnucks and let them know you will not shop at their store if they tear down the Sacred Heart Griffin Woods, the last woods in Springfield. And you're going to be famous. Look at your show, baby. Come on over to this purse. Ooh. There's Sunday and there's Monday. There's Tuesday and there's Wednesday. There's Thursday and there's Friday. And then there's Saturday. Days of the week. Days of the week. Days of the week. You're driving yellow. You're driving yellow. Which nobody can deny. He squawks too much. He don't talk enough like a cockatoo should. Oh, squawk, squawk, squawk too much. Yowza, 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 squawk.